Welcome back everyone, Oz here, and today I've got some RPG horror stories for you all. As per usual, I'll be narrating the post, giving you my opinions at the end, and I hope you do the same down in the comments down below. And without further ado, let's jump right into it. Hey, real quick by the way, GamerSupps is doing a 21% off for all partner codes, so if you want to get some GamerSupp for cheap, they'll use code Oz at checkout because the sale applies to all items site-wide, so definitely take advantage of that. Every purchase made using code Oz supports me directly, and I do mean directly. The sale starts February 21st at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and is going all the way until February 28th at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Banana Chops 52. DM makes several terrible calls and gets upset when there's pushback. Look, I get it. The DM makes the rules, blah blah blah. But when you have a DM removing stats from ability checks, trying to remove the ranger's ability to not get lost in their favorite terrain because it's overpowered bullshit, first time that's ever been said about a ranger ability ever, and overall just having a bad attitude unless they're winning. It gets old. I have no issue approaching disagreements head on, and would take time after each session to have a conversation about the things that myself and other players didn't like with the DM. They would dismiss literally everything. One point even saying, the other players suck at D&D, so it makes sense that their characters are stupid. I was speechless at that statement. Many sessions later, each with their own accompanying horror story, we reach the topic of conversation. So the party reaches an area in a large, inescapable dungeon. This area has an NPC spellcaster that is amicable, if not snooty. Literally everything in this dungeon has tried to kill us with no explanation. So my character shuts the door to the room and confers with the party that we're definitely gonna kill this guy, right? Party agrees. As we're discussing, DM says, suddenly the area around you is filled with darkness. And I ask, does this look similar to the darkness we've seen our warlock cast? DM hesitantly says yes. So I tell the group in character that as soon as this drops, we rush the bastard. And tell the DM that the moment the darkness drops, my character is rushing through the door. After a minute or two, DM says, everyone make a dexterity saving throw. We all ask why. They say that a wall of fire is hitting all of us. Mind you, the darkness is still up, the door's still shut, and we're all in a twisting hallway. I bring up that both wall of fire and darkness require concentration, and wall of fire requires line of sight. DM spends 15 minutes reading each spell, then says the darkness falls, but the wall of fire still hits all of us. We ask how he's casting it through the door. DM says it simultaneously burst through the door as he cast it. I state, since the darkness dropped, that would have triggered my movement, but DM argues that it happened too quickly to react. What? We're all flabbergasted at this shenaniganery, and ask, since Wall of Fire requires line of sight to cast, how did he cast it through the door, through the darkness, and through a twisting hallway with pinpoint precision to hit everyone? He can see the layout of the dungeon in his mind. What? After some back and forth, DM's now shouting, you all freak out and never let anything play out. So we calm down and say, all right, let's let this play out. Our sorcerer is up and says they throw a fireball in the room. You can't see in there due to the flames. What? Some more back and forth about the insane flip-flopping on rule interpretations. Eventually, DM relents, and the fireball is cast. Our rogue, who's playing through Discord and can't quite see the map, started in the fire, so they took damage. They then ask to move out of the fire, and ask the DM if they're out of the fire and won't take damage. DM, with a smirk, says, yes, you're out of the fire and safe. I know how Wall of Fire works, but keep my mouth shut, because surely the DM wouldn't tell a player they're safe when they're not. Nope. As the turn ends, you take 36 points of fire damage. Rogue is asking why. DM is saying they're too close to the fire. Everyone is asking why the DM thinks the character is so stupid that they would stay where they're actively being burned. DM says since it's magical, they don't realize they're burning. What? At this point, I'm packing my stuff up. DM says we're moving on to Banana Chop's turn. I say, nah, I'm out. I'm done with these insane combative rulings. Everyone is begging me to sit back down. I say, I know exactly how my turn will play out, but let's find out for fun. For visual imagining, my character was nearest to the door, about 15 feet away in a straight, 5-foot wide hallway. The wall of fire filled said hallway, the only way out being to continue through the wall of fire. I sit back down. My characters started their turn in the wall of fire, so they already took damage. I say, I move through the wall towards the wizard dick. DM says you take more fire damage. I ask how, in the evergreen fuck, do I take more damage, since I never left the wall of fire? I can't enter as I move through it, so no damage should occur. Their argument, you entered a new square in the wall of fire, so you take more damage. This is exactly how I anticipated they'd rule it, so I pack back up to leave again. DM relents on that decision to get me to sit back down. Against my better judgment, I do. My character rushes in and smashes the NPC's head in, ending the fight. Session continues and ends shortly after. Sidebar, a character died in a previous session, and DM says, too bad that fireball went through. The way to find player's new character was in there. Okay, bud. We play one more session after that one, culminating with another character dying to some more combative shenaniganery. So, now that campaign has ended. Now I DM for most of the players in that group, much to their satisfaction, with far less, none, DM versus player rulings. I'm posting this right before I go to bed and will answer questions, if any, when I wake up. So I've definitely stated this a ton while narrating RPG horror stories, but a DM that is fighting against his players is not properly playing the game because he gets to make the rules. You're essentially playing with a toddler and doing like, oh, who has the better weapon? Well, my sword can cut through diamond. Well, mine can cut through atoms. Oh yeah, well, mine's made of black holes. Like, that's essentially what these kind of DMs are. They're children who have to win through any bullshit contrived means necessary, including changing the rules of spells or doing random shit to try and kill off their players because they find it fun, and they don't realize the point of the game is not to fight your players, but to give them something to fight. That's the point of it. You are not fighting them, you're their babysitter. And any babysitter who yeets a toddler at the wall with a perfect football spiral is probably gonna get fired, and that's what happened here. You shouldn't be trying to win at babysitting, you should be trying to have a good time with everyone. That's kind of your whole job. Should you create challenges for your player? Yes, absolutely. But should you be actively fighting with them and trying to kill them off or nerf their abilities at any possible chance you get? No, you shouldn't. It's also a shame when you encounter a DM like this because oftentimes D&D is just used to hang out with the buds and actually just have a good like Saturday night or whatever. And sometimes you just put up with a shit DM to hang out with friends and it kind of just becomes part of the routine, unfortunately. I also want to point out that he punished one of the characters for using Fireball when they were 100% able to by essentially making it so that way that Fireball made it so someone couldn't get a new character after the DM presumably killed their previous one. So he's very much just in favor of making everyone's time at the table hell. As long as he's winning, he's having fun. If you're not having fun, that's because you're bad at D&D and that makes your character stupid. Red Fox music. Manipulation check? Fail. I've been a fairly long time player with this purely online D&D group. There was one player who I'll call Steve. Steve plays decent, but most of his character ideas were typically from other media. He claimed that they weren't, but Seven Family Names the Fourth, a gunslinger haunted by a tragic family event, was totally original, of course. So was the sorcerer in brown coat that burned his family alive. Regardless, we played on and eventually, I can't really recall how exactly, but he'd been particularly annoying to play with and was obstructing progress more than helping it. I told the DM, do you want me to talk about it? Since I usually was the conflict resolution guy. DM said sure, but on a condition. That'll come up later. I messaged Steve and after some niceties, I explained that we weren't particularly happy with his playing today. Steve responds apologetically. He was particularly fond of playing with me. You're among the best players I've played with. I'll take the ego stroke, but he asks the question, do you have any feedback for me to do better next session or future sessions? It was pretty typical stuff, and he engaged within the moment too, responded well, and seemed appreciative of the feedback. It became a pretty pleasant conversation overall. It was late in the evening, so we said goodnight and we'd chat another time. The following morning, the DM is texting me that Steve had messaged him. He claimed I was verbally abusing him and bullying him in the conversation, and so on and so forth. It's true the conversation started a bit blunt and harsh, but abusive? The DM screen shared the conversation he had with Steve over text. We burst out laughing. What Steve didn't know is that the DM requested a screenshot of my end of the feedback conversation the night before, just so we'd have clarity on what was given feedback on. That was the condition he'd given. Steve had edited every Discord message to take a victim tone of, "Please, not tonight, I'm doing very poorly mentally." The DM asked why all his messages said edited at the end. Steve alleged he was making typos because he was so distraught by everything. At my recommendation, the DM asked Steve to take a screenshot of the edited timestamp. If you didn't know that was a thing, we didn't either. It is. Hover over that part and you'll see when it was last edited, not the history. To summarize the end, we confronted Steve with the conversation screenshots that actually happened the night before. He didn't have much to say and, as a result, was kicked from both the game and some projects too, if I remember correctly. This remains genuinely one of the funniest bits of drama I've ever experienced. This was several years ago, and we've since spoken and metaphorically shook hands. Never asked or understood the goal behind this honestly. I'm also thankful for that DM approaching me first about it, since they knew I wouldn't do this and personally take mental health seriously. Don't let edited messages fool you, kids. So, to recap real quick, just so we're all on the same page, they had a problematic player who was doing things that not everyone really enjoyed. He was confronted about it, over DMs by the sounds of it. The conversation occurred, and then Steve went back and edited every message to make himself look to be the victim. What he didn't realize, because he had edited the messages so long after the conversation, all the edit timestamps that show up when you hover over the edit tag show that they all happened in congruence way after the conversation had happened. And just showed that he went in retrospectively to change the narrative of the conversation to try and get OP in trouble, when it was actually Steve was the one who was trying to manipulate everyone to turn against OP, trying to, cover his tracks essentially. Because OP had originally gotten screenshots of the entire conversation, it was very obvious that Steve was being manipulative and trying to turn the tides against OP, and thus got caught red-handed. Let this be a lesson that if you're ever confronting someone who might be maybe a little bit less than honest, always get screenshots of the conversation, especially if you're confronting them about something, because you never know what kind of bullshit they might try to do, or just what kind of stuff they might try to pull to change the narrative around to make themselves either seem like the victim or that, you're the one who's actually at fault here. Never be afraid to get a paper trail. Knusperfrosh. Player deliberately designed character to break the group. Let me start by saying I firmly believe it's the player's responsibility to create characters who are able to function in a group and come up with in-character reasons to not screw over or murder other characters, even if they are of a different alignment, worldview, fictional species, opposed character classes, just to prevent interplayer conflict. It's totally fine if the goal is to have an undercover character, secretly evil character in a group of good characters, or mage hunter in a group of spellcasters, or D&D paladin who was taught tieflings are all fiend-tainted monsters, etc. Whose real identity is unknown to the other characters. If the player and GM have already planned an arc of character growth where said character will evolve and gain redemption through friendship, or learn that not all members of Group X are wicked, that can lead to very satisfying roleplay. But a player deliberately creating a character with the clear intention to hamstring or harass other characters to break the group? No. I've actually seen that thing happen back in the late 1990s in a GURPS fantasy campaign played via online text chat room, in the days prior to video/voice call software. We were all in our 20s. We all knew each other from a fantasy club. The group happened to be comprised almost entirely of different kinds of magic users, sorcerer-like spellcasters, a healer herbalist, a mystical swordsman, all heavily relying on magic. It was total coincidence, as we players, the majority of whom were female, including me, had created our characters independently from each other. The male GM had allowed us a lot of freedom to use various GURPS rulebooks. Or is it GURPS? I've only ever read about it. I've never actually heard someone talk about it, because it's an RPG from the 90s. So, if you ever played GURPS or GURPS, let me know, because, again, only ever read about it. With the only requirements, the character had to fit in a medieval-ish fantasy setting and had to have reason to travel from A to B through the wilderness. Only exception from the magic user front was my character, a ghoul from Lovecraft's Dreamland stories. Note, Lovecraft's ghouls are a humanoid species alive, not undead, who wore a magical illusion amulet to appear as a middle-aged, balding human guy, so he wouldn't get lynched while living among humans, and pretended to be a traveling tanner and furrier to explain away his slight carrion smell he had despite him using strong-smelling herbs. He actually did have those craftsman skills, mind you. But our group was chill with having weird character backgrounds. That wasn't a problem. The other players knew my character was not human, but were curious about him, and the ghoul was such an amiable, unassuming guy. When the other travelers eventually found out he carried a preserved human brain in his backpack, because while he could eat normal food, he preferred carrion and needed to snack on a sentient creature's brain once a month, and saw his real face and that he had long, digging claws like a giant ground sloth. Everyone just shrugged and went, "Hey, so Gerard is a hairless, hyena-faced creature of the old gods, who can dig tunnels in record time and who occasionally eats the brains of hanged criminals. Yeah, I don't care. He's a nice guy. Let's help him maintain his cover identity when we meet people." Now, the problem started when some sessions in, another player from the extended friends group wanted to join the already full group. I didn't personally know her, but because she was an acquaintance of the GM, he allowed it. But right from the first session, which introduced her character, we knew it was going to be problematic. Her character was a weird, waifish, white-haired, ghostly pale, skinny fae-like girl with pearly white eyes in total amnesia, clad in a thin white gown, whom we found lying around on a plinth in a creepy tower in the middle of a wasteland, with a weird amulet around her neck she couldn't take off. Amnesiac fae goth girl was utterly unable to care for herself, but for some plot reason, we were forced to take her with us, because prophecy, or whatever, and the swordsman was tasked to protect her. Worse, Amnesiac fae goth girl constantly admitted an anti-magic zone around herself with a radius of several meters. And not merely as a penalty to all magic casting. Nope, a 100% no magic zone where spells, magic items like swords and amulets, and supernatural powers didn't work. I'm sure you can spot the problem here. For some unfathomable reason, the GM had allowed this, assuming he had seen the character sheet prior to introducing the character. This meant we could not leave her behind, despite several of us, me including, secretly telling the GM in private messages that we saw no logical in-character reason to drag this creature with us. And Problem Player did everything to make life difficult for our characters, which quickly resulted in most of the playing time revolving around her character in our attempts to work around her stupid anti-magic aura. Yet the GM refused to ask her to make a new character or kick her from the group because he desperately wanted to not exclude anyone. It ended with us, the original group, telling the GM we would be leaving the campaign as it had become nearly unplayable, annoying, and no longer fun. And it's a shame because we had really liked our characters. I wasn't even angry at the GM, he was simply too gentle for his own good. Then, a short while later, I got a private message from one of the other players who told me she had heard through the grapevine that the player of the amnesiac anti-magic fae girl had proudly remarked that she had created that character specifically to break the group. Like, what the fuck? Players like this are just awful because it's hard to identify someone who's accidentally, fucking up and breaking the group because they're trying to play their character, and someone who is maliciously trying to tear the group apart because they get some sort of sick enjoyment of it. And unfortunately, since even the days of Gary Gygax, players like this have existed. And the difficulty can be identifying which one is just someone who's fucking up and playing their character and who's actually being malicious. And I actually do like what OP stated here in the first paragraph. They talk about, even if you think your character might do this, it's always a good idea to be coming up with in-character reasons not to be screwing over those players or characters, or even just preventing player conflict, as OP was stating. Because with a little bit of creativity, you can pretty easily create any kind of reason why your player or character may not do those specific actions that go against their alignment or worldview. Maybe they're plotting or planning something in the background. Just Something along those lines. It's a lot easier than causing conflict or a game-breaking character that was designed to specifically fuck with the entire party. And also, if you're a DM, don't ruin your game in the name of inclusivity. Because if you have a player that is unwilling to make any kind of changes to the character sheet, who is actively making the game worse for all of your other players, especially when they're a new insert, don't just let them get away with it because you're afraid of not being inclusive, because you're going to, in the process of trying to include one, exclude 5 or more. So don't feel like you have to do that in order to have some inclusivity game. The first thing you should always do is approach the problem player and let them know, hey, the other players aren't happy with the way you're doing this and feel like that you're either doing this on purpose or you're just trying to ruin the game for everyone else. And if they have a come to Jesus moment and start making changes, cool. You have a player that just fucked up with playing their character. But if they are hard set on keeping their character and tell the others to just simply deal with it or figure it out, get them out of that party. They're gonna ruin the game for everyone else. What I will say though, in my experience, I've never personally DM'd a game where I had a player doing this, but I have been a player in a game where someone else was trying to break it and make everyone's life horrible. And I've also had a DM that specifically set up encounters to make all the players' lives horrible in hell, and would pull out bullshit like, oh, you guys are level 5? Okay, level 18 boss fight right now. Tabletop games are about having a good time with friends, and if someone is actively trying to ruin the fun for others, whether it's the game master or it's a player, sometimes you gotta put the party first and figure out what the best way to move forward is so everyone is still having fun and one player isn't ruining the game for everyone else. Demone. I just walked out of my first game ever. GM narratively forced my character into being a mass shooter. Been playing Werewolf, the Apocalypse, for the last few months at a local comic shop. Setting is modern-day Appalachia with cryptids that we're hunting down. The game has been great, until tonight. We were investigating a lumber company that has been doing illegal logging and stirring up local monsters on the process. The plan was to kidnap one of the sons of the owner for information. We went to a local bar to meet him as prospective buyers and lured him out onto the patio where we would be away from other people. It turned out he had a bodyguard. Things got ugly, and I unloaded an MP40 into his guard. Once again, we lured them outside where we would be alone. This was a major point. We didn't want witnesses. After the fight, the guard is down and we're making our getaway. About 20 minutes after the fight, the GM then informs me that I shot 26 other people with my MP40 and 7 of them died. I was now a mass shooter and had committed the worst shooting in the history of West Virginia. My stomach literally turned. I was stunned. I looked at him and asked point blank if he was really making my character a mass shooter. I explained that the area was clear. There was no one around. How could I possibly hit 26 innocent people? He said no. The area was very crowded and there were lots of people eating on the patio. I tried talking to him and explaining that he had never once said anyone was out there with us. The other 3 players were looking as shocked as I felt. I asked him again if he was sticking to this, that I shot 26 innocents and killed 7, and he was adamant. I handed him my character sheet, picked up my dice, phone, and wallet, and walked out and drove home. I know it's just a game, but am I crazy for feeling this was so far over the line? I've been playing tabletop role-playing games for decades and DMing for decades. I would have never done this to a player, ever. I'm still pissed. Yeah, the GM casually not mentioning the fact there were 26 other people in a crowded area when you were specifically trying to pull away the son of the logging company so that way you could get information and get him alone, and then suddenly 26 people just appeared. It would have been one thing if the GM was like, you didn't check thoroughly enough for witnesses and some people saw you. That would be one thing, but for him to then go on about, yeah, you shot 26 people and now 7 of them are dead and you're responsible for one of the most horrific mass shootings in the state, that sucks. Especially when the GM was the reason why the shooting had to even happen, because he put a bodyguard there, and, why would the son of a logging company need a bodyguard? Feels like he set something up, or maybe he had the idea of wanting to have the shooting take place and thought it would be a fun narrative thing to happen to make everyone fugitives. But, had to find some way to implement it, so fuck it. Railroading that in. You thought you were being stealthy, but nope, you're now responsible for one of those heinous acts in West Virginia's history. Oopsie. If I had to guess, this is a plot point that GM really wanted to explore, but was trying to find a way to implement it and, just had a really poor way of implementing it. Now, maybe the GM was trying to establish consequences for their actions, but they were trying to bring him to a secluded area and were actively checking for that. So it just makes no sense for a bunch of people to just randomly appear. Just not a good way of implementing consequences, in my opinion, and definitely just sloppy. So yeah, OP was definitely justified to leave the table because that's just not a fun thing to have put on your shoulders. OP gave GM multiple chances, let them know they were deeply uncomfortable with this narrative change, especially with all the steps they tried taking, and GM stood by what they decided, and it was 100% fair for them to walk away. Confident Chapter 2496. Shouldn't have drunk the wine. Lighthearted story. More funny than horror, but during the pandemic, my friends and I did a meme one-shot over Discord, our DM's first ever original campaign. The plot was simple. We went to a village, discovered they were all brainwashed, and we needed to find who was behind it and break the spell. The villagers offered our characters special wine that sparkled when the light hit it right. Eventually, after a few fights and investigation periods, we all drank it, or for some of us, were just captured by the villagers with those who drank it falling under the curse. We were taken to a beautiful, sparkling lake, and the villagers began to chant to bring forth their patron goddess. The lake water, the sparkling wine we had been made to drink. The lady of the lake, the one behind the curse, Bella fucking Delphine. We all fell silent before losing it, our DM losing his shit as we cursed him out. I could hear his smirk through the call as he calmly asked us how the wine tasted. I really need to get him to make another campaign, lol. And yes, while this was a horror story, it was more of a horror story for the characters, not necessarily the players, and this is the kind of fun nonsense that you can encounter with a party of people in D&D that are just looking to have a good time and not necessarily be too serious about it. You can have fun, goofy one-shots that don't have any consequences to it and just, enjoy the time you spend with your buddies. As long as the DM's not trying to fight you and also just trying to have a good time. Like this, D&D can be a pretty goofy way to hang out with your friends. And it's a damn shame that so many of these horror stories exist because they can definitely ruin some people's fun of the game, and it's a shame. So don't be afraid and don't let these RPG horror stories throw you off or make you more avoidant to play D&D or any other tabletop RPG. Because, trust me, if you can find a good party to play with, the kind of shenanigans that you'll end up encountering, whether it's a serious campaign or not, are just 100% worth it. It's good memories that'll last you and your group a lifetime. Hey, welcome to the outro. Don't forget GamerSupps is doing 20% off for all partner codes, so if you use code OZ at checkout, you get 21% off. And yes, it does directly support me. I really do mean that. Again, the sale is going on until February 21st at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, all the way to February 28th at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And of course, not to mention, GamerSupps has more than just caffeine products. They have caffeine-free, they actually have ramen noodles, they have mouse pads, posters, t-shirts, their t-shirts are actually really comfortable, and just a lot of really cool stuff. Plus, non-waifu stuff as well if you don't want to be wearing a degenerate shirt around, so there is that as well. They've actually got some really cool non-anime girl designs that I'm actually a really big fan of. So again, if you want to take advantage of the 21% off and get yourself a nice comfy shirt, this is like the perfect time to do it. Use code OZ at checkout because again, it does directly support me.